Okay, Rabbi. Erev Shabbat Shalom. It's Leil Shishi. It's a holy time to learn Parashat HaShavua. We are analyzing tonight Parashat Vayechi. The class has been sponsored by Anonymous in memory of Genya Bat Tzila. So whatever Torah mitzvot and the brachot that we make should be Le'ilu Neshama. Ruach Adonai Terechim Began Eden. V'tiyim B'Shabbat Tzorah B'Zruch Hayim. Amen. So we're in the parasha of brachot that Yaakov gives over to his children, and that's the bulk of the parasha. I want to analyze b'shutchem the some of the brachot that he gives over. Of course, the most famous bracha that he gives over is something that we give over to our children. Many people have the custom to sing this bracha with their kids when they put them to sleep. Our custom is that when the children get an aliyah simchat Torah, the rabbi or the Rabbi, he gives the children these brachot, and that is the bracha of Hamalach HaGoloti. And if you look in the Pesukim, that's not on the sheet, but one of the things that he says over there, Yaakov tells his children, Vayikara behen shemi, b'shem avotai, Abraham u Yitzchak. Right, that's the verse that he says. And what bothers the rabbis in this pasuk is, it seems like what he's telling the children is, let's define, let's translate. Vayikara behen shemi, that your children should be called in my name. Vayikare behem shemi, they should be called in my name. And then he says, and also b'shem avotai, in the name of the forefathers, Abraham or Yitzchak. So there's two questions the rabbis ask over here. Number one, does it sound like Yaakov is asking his children that anytime you name your children, the Jewish people, it should be b'shem avotai, in my own name. Vayikare behem shemi, your children's name should be either Yaakov or Yisrael. And not only that, but also Abraham or Yitzchak. Is that the request of Yaakov, that the children should be named after him? And not only that, but you find it strange that what is kibbud av va'em? When you respect your parents, you always put your parents' name before your own name. And even in their death, actually, the Gemara says that more respect does it apply after your parents die than when they're actually alive. Now, at this point in time, Yitzchak and Yaakov and Abraham are not alive anymore. So I would assume that anytime Yaakov is quoting his parents, he would quote them before himself. But in this pasuk, it's not like that. At first he quotes Be'ikra behem shemi, first my name, and then b'shem avotai Abraham or Yitzchak. I'm asking a very simple question. This is something that we say almost every single day, so why not get an understanding? So these questions they're asked by Chacham Yehuda Tzadka, the Rosh Yeshiva Prat Yosef, Alav Shalom, and he comes along and he explains as follows. He says that one time, Apia Mashal, there was a rabbi, and the rabbi is boarding a train, and he's in a rush. So as he's about to get on the train in a big rush, one of his students come over and they tell him, Hacham, I have a question to ask you. And he says, well, what's the question? I'm in a rush, I need to get on the train. He goes, well, very quick question. He goes, what's the question? He goes, I just had a baby boy, and I need to know what to name him. Do you have any suggestions? And the rabbi said, come on, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, David, Yosef, Shlomo, you have plenty of names. And he gets inside the car and he leaves. A week later, he meets the student. He says, no, what did you name the baby? And the student says, exactly what you told me. Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, David, Yosef, Shlomo. That is the mashal. The nimshal says, Chacham Yehuda Tzadka, that it's not really the point of the naming of the actual name of the forefathers. Yes, it's very important to name our children biblical names. That is important. But what Yaakov meant when he said, Vayikare behem shemi, b'shem avotai, Abraham Yitzchak, what he really meant was that we know that the forefathers, they each had a special character in which they exemplified it. Abraham, he's chesed. Abraham is kindness. Abraham is monotheism. Abraham is emunah. He brought that emunah into the world. That is Abraham. And Yitzchak, we know what Yitzchak is. Yitzchak is, his discipline. Yitzchak is self-sacrifice. Yitzchak is somebody that exemplifies what does it mean to die al pi kiddush Hashem. That is Yitzchak. And of course, Yaakov is what? Yaakov is Torah. Each time you shape alalim. Therefore, when Yaakov says Chacham Yehuda Tzadka, when he told his children, Vayikare behem shemi Abraham Yitzchak, he didn't really mean call them by my name. Even though that is very nice, but what he really meant to say was, I want the children to exemplify the character traits that we have. And just like Abraham is chesed, and just like Yitzchak is discipline, just like I am Torah, that is what I want my children to exemplify in. That is part one of the question. Part two of the question says, but pay very close attention on how he words it. Who does he put first? He first puts himself, then he puts his forefathers. Why does he do that? Because Yaakov is telling me the order of importance. You want to know what is the most important character trait of them all? It's Torah first. Vayikra behem shemi. First, you have to tell the children what is my character trait. My character trait is and then afterwards they could acquire the chesed. Afterwards they could acquire the discipline. What you want to know what's first? Says Chacham Yehuda Tzadka, what's first is Torah. He wasn't trying to disrespect his parents by putting himself first. He was trying to say that the most important character trait a person can have is the Torah that he learns, and therefore that is the main goal. Based on that, we once explained that if you look in the Pesukim in Parasha, not this Parasha, but it's said many times, we even say it in the Shachanit in the morning by the Korbanot. What do we say? V'zachrati et briti Yaakov, va'af et briti Yitzchak, va'af et briti Abraham eskor va'eretz eskor. The same question applies. Why are you putting Yaakov first? The answer is, like we've been saying, that the whole goal is you first have to focus on the Torah. Then you can focus on the Hesed, then you can focus on the Tefillah, then you can focus on everything else. But you want to know the main goal of Yaakov, the main goal, this is the main goal of Jews, is we must know that our main focus should be in the Torah. I was sitting with the public school kids the other day, and one of the kids, he told me, he said that he's in school all day and he feels like he never has to know any of these things. So when is a person going to use algebra? When is a person going to use, calculus? When is a person supposed to use, ancient history? These things are, you get a job and you never actually have to put it into practice. And I said, do you feel the same way about your Torah learning? He goes, no, Torah learning is different. I said, why? He goes, and this is the Hidush, and I'm proud because this is what I told him. I said, because you're right. When it comes to other type of education, you might not use it later on in your life, but Torah is different. Torah, you still have an obligation to learn it, whether or not you're going to use it, whether or not you're not going to use it. Because bottom line is that when it comes to your Torah education, God pays you for the effort and not what you've gained. Hashem is not going to count the fact that you read a couple of pages in a book and then you put it back on the bookshelf, you never read it again. Hashem says whatever pages you read, you're going to get credit for. When it comes to the non-Jewish world, you only get credit for the money, for the product that you produced. If you didn't produce, you could have worked all day, but you didn't produce. The boss tells you, bottom line is you didn't produce anything, you're not going to get paid. Hashem says you get paid for the effort. As long as there's effort that's expunged into the learning, Hashem says you're going to get paid for that as well. And for it says Yaakov, you want to know the most important character trait that you have to have? The most important character trait is Torah. That's why we once explained that if you pay attention, when the Sasha Esav, when the Satan of Esav, when he comes to attack Yaakov, I think the Haidah asked this question. He says, why did the Satan wait in order to attack Yaakov? How come he did not attack Abraham? How come he did not attack Yitzchak? He specifically went for Yaakov. And their answer is like we're saying, because the Satan doesn't get threatened by the character trait of the other avot. When it comes to chesed, it's very easy to open up a gamach. What's a gamach? Gimel chasadim. You want to open up a soup kitchen, you want to open up a clothing to give over free clothing, you're not getting any pushback, it's going to be easy. You want to open up a gamach that day is going to be open. Because why? Satan doesn't feel threatened by Abraham. Abraham is chesed, that's great, but again, I'm not threatened. Therefore, if you want to open up gamach, no pressure, no pushback, it's going to get open that day. Even when it comes to Yitzchak is tefillah, Yitzchak is gibura. So even when it comes to opening synagogues, the Satan is not threatened by the opening up of synagogues. You want to get 10 men together, you want to build a building, you want to make some investments, it's going to be simple. You're not going to get any pushback from who? From the Satan. However, what are you going to get pushback for? When it comes to the kollel. When it comes to learning in the yeshivot, when it comes to collecting money for the yeshiva, when it comes to even sending our own kids to yeshiva, why is it so difficult? Why we see so many parents dropping out of the yeshiva system? They say to themselves, why should I spend $30,000 plus a year when I could just get it for free in the public school system? Where does that come from? Where does that stem from? That stems because the Satan, he feels the most threatened by the Torah. And therefore he specifically attacked Yaakov because he says, if I don't attack Yaakov, then I'm out of a job. I don't have to attack Abraham. I don't have to attack Yitzhak. Bottom line is that I'm very comfortable in my position because no matter what they do, I'm still going to be employed. The only person that can take away my employment is who? Is Yaakov. And therefore he specifically goes for Yaakov, which represents Torah, because he says, if I could attack Yaakov, if I could get to people not to learn Torah, whatever, no matter what that encompasses, yeshivot or kollel, that's why it's so hard to learn Rabotai. It's so hard to learn in the morning. It's so hard to learn to come to yeshiva at night, because we're exhausted. That exhaustion, that tiredness that you feel at the end of the night is coming from the Satan, because he knows that bottom line is if he could get you not to learn, then he is succeeding in his job. And therefore, yes, the Satan ignores Abraham because he's not threatened by chesed. The Satan ignores Yitzchak because he's not threatened by gibura, by tefillah. What he is threatened by, he's threatened by the Torah of Yaakov. And therefore, his whole goal is try to get that Yaakov not to do what he represents in order to make us fail as well. And I'm very happy about this, by the way, because this makes so much sense with the beginning of the parasha, when it says that Yaakov is about to die. What does Pasuk say? Vayikrebu yemei Yisrael lamut, vayikra libno Yosef. He calls Yosef. And the question the Mepharshim asks is, why is he calling specifically to Yosef? Why not call any of the other children that you had? You have 12 of them, you have so many grandchildren, and you're calling specifically to Yosef. You want to know the answer to? Because Yosef was his chavruta. Yosef was the guy that he learned Torah with. In fact, if you look at the Tur, in the beginning of the parasha, it says Vayechi Yaakov. It says the Tur, if you take the Gematria of Vayechi, wait, we can do it together. It's the Vav and the Het, that's 14, and 34 altogether. 34 is the exact amount of years that Yaakov felt Vayechi. He felt like he was alive. Vayechi Yaakov means the life of Yaakov. The 17 years before Yosef was kidnapped, plus the 17 years that he ended up being in Egypt, 17 plus 17, is 34. Therefore, he says to himself that, you want to know the years I felt alive in? I felt the years alive when I was talking to my chavruta, when I was talking with my son Yosef, the son that I was ben Zukunim. Says the Targum, he was bar hakim, he was smart, because all the Torah that Yaakov learned, he gave it over to Yosef. Rabbi Mutzavi, he explains this derech mashal. He says that one time, there was a big Baal Chesed. This Baal Chesed was part of all the Chesed communities you could know. He was part of Hatzalah, and he was part of Shomrim, and he was FDNY, and he was all the guy. Anytime somebody need help, this guy would be there in order to help. And then one day, he gets a letter from the IRS that he's being audited. And he owed thousands and thousands of dollars in back taxes. And a person knows Marat Nafsho, a person knows exactly how he's guilty. And Bemet, he was guilty. He owed the IRS a lot of money. And he's very nervous for the court date. And his wife tries to cheer him up. And she brings all the family members and all his friends and all the people that he did chesed for. She brings them to the house. She makes a big suda just to cheer him up. And everyone's asking, when is the big court date? And he says, it's next week. Can anybody here help me? So one group of friends says, yes, we're going to help you. We're going to hold your hands as you walk inside the courtroom. And he says, you're going to hold my hands? That's what you're going to do? You're going to hold my hands after everything I did for you? You're going to hold my hands after all the times I was called in Hatzalah and I came to your house in the middle of the night? After all the times that I was there for you changing your tires? After all the times that your wife gave birth and I made a train meal? After all that, you're going to hold my hand as you get into the courtyard? Is that what's going to happen? And then he tells the next group of kids, the next group of people, how are you going to help me? Don't worry, we're going to be there waiting for you in the courthouse with a box of pizza. I said, a box of pizza? Are you serious? And everything I've done for you, you're going to bring me a box of pizza? And then finally, he has the knock on the door. After everybody gave him a bad excuse why they couldn't help him, he has the knock on the door. He opens the door and it's his best friend. And his best friend is exhausted. He has bags under his eyes. He looks like he hasn't slept in 36 hours. And he tells him, he goes, I got it. He goes, I got how I'm going to help you. He goes, what's the plan? He goes, the plan is that I got the best doctor to write you a sick note. And you're not going to show up on the day of your court. Instead, I'm going to represent you. I've been staying up all night to figure out exactly what I'm going to say to get you to be Zakai Badin, to get you the non-guilty verdict. And that's exactly what happened. He came, the court date, he went, he was sick, and he got him to be non-guilty. That is the mashal. The nimshal says, Rabbi Mutzafi, he says that's exactly what's going to happen to us. After 120 years, after all the chesed that we've done, after all the chesed we've done with our families, after all the money we put into our families, after all the tuition we've paid, after all the bikes and cars and toys we bought our children, but Yom Hadin, after 120 years, we're going to come to them, we're going to ask them, who's going to help me? I have a court date come up, who's going to help me? And everyone's going to say, Abba, we can't do much. The only person that's going to come along and say, I can help you, is the Torah that we've learned. That is the best friend that came to the guy's case, and he said exactly what's going to be. The Torah can come to you, and all the mitzvot. You went to shul, you learned Torah, that's going to be the guy that's going to knock on your door, your best friend who's going to appear exhausted, he's going to say, I can make you become Zakai B'din. Bottom line is that anytime we learn Torah, it comes, an angel is created, and it comes to our defense. The Kav Yashar tells an unbelievable story. How one time there was a small village, village somewhere in Europe, and they didn't have access to many Masechtot. They only had one Masechet in the entire village, and that was Masechet Chagigat. You know the story? And the guy learned Masechet Chagigat his entire life. For 45 years, the guy's pouring over Masechet Chagigat. And finally, after he died, there was no way to bury him. And a woman appeared out of nowhere, a woman that nobody's ever saw in the town, and she's crying, and she's gathering to the people, please, help me be Maspid this man, help me eulogize this man. And she came, she gathered people, and she buried him, and she's crying. She said, what's going to be with the Masechet? What's going to be with the Masechet? And they asked her, they said, who are you? Are you his wife? Not his wife. Are you his grandmother? Not his grandmother. What's your name? And she said, Hagigah Shemi. My name is Hagigah. And the rabbi came, and the rabbi then explained that this woman took the physical form of Masechet Hagigah because he was so close to her in his lifetime that she was the only person that came along and stood for him at his Yom Hadin. And therefore, yes, the connection between Yaakov and Yosef is very important because he wanted Yosef there specifically because he knew nobody else, none of my children can help me except Yosef HaTzadik. Since he is my chavruta, since he's my ticket to Gan Eden, he was the man learner. Therefore, the lesson, I guess he says, is that we have to put more effort into our Torah. Bottom line, there's no sugarcoating it. Bottom line is that when we make more effort, it's not only that we're learning more, it's not only the fact that we're going to be better, husbands and fathers and just people in general, but we're hand in hand fighting the Satan. That is one analyzation of the pasuk of why it's so important. That specifically Vayikra Behem Shemi, it's my name first, because I represent what the Torah represents. But B'Shutchem, that's just an introduction. B'Shutchem, what I really wanted to talk about is the bracha that Yaakov gives over to who? To Zebulun. If you look at the very first source, says the Torah in Mem Tet Yud Gimel, Zebulun lechof yamim yishkon. He's going to rest where? The Chof Yamim, which is by the seashore. Who? Lechof Aniyot, he's going to be by the ship's harbor. V'yarkato ala Tzidon, and the end is going to be in Tzidon. And then we know the next pasuk is Yisachar Hamor Garem, and we know that there is a connection, a special connection between these two Shabbatim, between the Zebulun and between the Yisachar. What is the connection? It says Rashi in the very next source, Vehu Yem Matzui Tadir al Chof Oniyot, that Zebulun is going to be always found by the Chof Oniyot. He's going to be by the seashore, because they bring the business. And what does Rashi say? Because Zebulun, he would work in the business world and he would bring money over to Yisachar, and Yisachar would learn the Torah. So there was an agreement between these two Shabbatim. Yisachar would be the learners and Zebulun would be the earners. Very good. Zebulun in business, that was the business deal between the two Shabbatim, always, that there would be the Yisachars and there would be the Zebuluns. In fact, this is actually halakha and Shulchan Aruch. This is not just something Rashi made up. It says Maran, halakha, just like washing your hands in the morning is a halakha. It says Maran, it's Siman Reish Memba, this comes from Yorah De'ah. It says Maran, Kol Ish Yisrael, Hayav b'Talmud Torah. Everybody must learn Torah. Ben ani, ben ashir, whether he's wealthy, whether he's poor. Ben shalem b'gufo, ben ba'al bisurin, whether he's suffering from body ailments or whether he's healthy. Ben bachor ben zaken, whether you are a young child, whether you're an old man. Afilu ani hamechazav betachim, even if you are a poor man knocking on doors to collect tzedakah. Afilu bal ishal banim, even though you have children, you have a wife, and a lot of things that take your mind out of the learning. Still, hayav likboa lozman letamud Torah biyom ubalayla. You have to learn day and night. Me, she'iev shalom lemod, but if a person cannot learn, he doesn't know how, because he's so busy. You should provide other people to learn for you. Says the Rama, and it's be considered, if you enable people to learn, it will be considered as if you yourself learned. You can make a stipulation with your friend, that's going to be the sachar. You could provide somebody with the ability to learn, and he's going to provide you the money, and you're going to split it down the middle. Whatever he makes, he gives to you, and you learn. So just to analyze this point for a second, halachically, what are we talking about over here? How does it exactly work? What's the business agreement? So I'll tell you what Shulchan Aruch says in his sefer called Shut Avkat Ruchal. Maran comes along, Maran says how much exactly money is split between the Yisachar and Zebulun. According to Shulchan Aruch, how much is it? It's 50-50. Meaning to say that the Zebulun must give 50% of his earnings over to the Yisachar, and the Yisachar gives over 50% of his learnings over to the Zebulun. That's what it is, 50-50. He gets 50% of my money, and I get 50% of his learning. By the way, it should also be pointed out.
Unless otherwise stipulated.
No, if you want a Yisachar Zebulun type of arrangement, it's got to be 50-50. But it should be pointed out, something that Rabbi Shlomo Kluger points out, it doesn't count that if a person comes to a Yisachar after the guy already became Gadol Hador. You can't come over to a Chacham Ovadia Yosef when the guy's 90 years old and the guy's reading 50 books already, everybody's kissing his hand, getting barachot. You can't come over to him and say, oh, you know what? I want to be your Zebulun. It doesn't work that way. You got to find an Avrech that is just, if he's a bunny Tamid Chacham, you got to say, I want to support you. You can't be a guy that already is well into his years and everybody's kissing his hand. It doesn't work that way. You got to find a young guy, and that's who you support, by the way. That should be pointed out. But what I want to tell you is that is shita of Shulchan Aruch. It's got to be 50-50. But I saw Hidush in my Rebbe Sefer. It's called Minhat HaSher, Asher Weiss. He comes over and he has a novel interpretation. What does it mean, Yisachar Zebulun? He comes over and he says, no, you don't understand. It could be that the Zebulun will give the Yisachar 50% of his earnings. That's fine. But the Yisachar cannot give any of his Olam Haba over to Zebulun. It's not your Olam Haba to give over. What do you mean you're giving him 50%? You didn't acquire your Olam Haba yet that you're able to come along and say, you know what, I'm going to give you over 50%. 50% of what? You don't own anything yet. That is his shita. He goes with Haigon, and that's what Haigon says. Bottom line is that you can't give over 50% of something that you don't have.
You can lose it also.
So he says, very important, he says, so what does it mean that Yisachar Zebulun? He goes, yes, the Zebulun is going to give 50% of his earnings. And how much does Yisachar give? Says Rav Asher Weiss, he gives over 100%. 100% of not the learning of Yisachar. The fact that Yisachar is learning, we consider it as if the Zebulun is learning as well. Not that he's giving over 50% of anything. He doesn't have anything to give over. Rather, you're enabling. When the Zebulun supports, it's considered as if the Zebulun has learned. And therefore the Zebulun gets how much? 100% of the earnings, because it's considered as if he himself has done the learning. By the way, why is this a good arrangement? Why is this not different than when I come along and I donate $10,000 to the Kolel? Why is Yisachar Zebulun such a... Did I tell you the story that when I was learning in Israel, one day I was in Osha'ad. Osha'ad is bingo. And when I was there, they were asking who here is B'nai Torah from Eidah Bukharit. Who are the Bukharim B'nai Torah? And I was wondering why. I was afraid they're gonna throw me in jail. He said no, because Lev Levayev, Shem Shemerenu, he came along and he donated a tremendous amount of money, specifically that the gift cards of 2,000 shekel, which is about $500, should go to only B'nai Torah of the Bukharian Jews that are learning in Kolel. And if you are learning in Kolel and your background is Bukharian, you're able to get a $2,000 gift card to Osha'at, to bingo. You could shop the holidays on Lev Levayev. That's something he donated. So why is that different than a person coming along and saying, no, Yisachar Zebulun? What's the obvious answer? The obvious answer is because if you're coming along, you're donating the money to the Kolel, some of your money is going to the Avrech, but not everything. Take it from somebody that learned for 12 years in the Kolel, making $500 a month. You're worried every single day, where's your money going to come from? From week to week, from month to month, from year to year, the Avrechim are worried, where is the money going to come from? Yes, it happens by miracle that we're able to pay our bills. But bottom line is the Avrech is worried because he has no idea where his money is going to come from. But what is Yisachar Zebulun? Yisachar Zebulun is the guy, the Avrech is calm. Because he knows that the Zebulun is giving over 50% of his earnings. He can learn b'sheket u'b'shalva. And he says, whatever I'm going to learn, let the Zebulun get the zechut of that as well. So that is Rav Asher's way of understanding how Yisachar the Zebulun works. The Zebulun gets over 50% and the Yisachar gets 100%. What is his proof? Listen to this. What is his proof that a person cannot sell over his Olam Haba? Listen to a question that he got over 40 years ago. One time there was a question in Bnei Brak. They came, Rahman Litzlan, there was a girl that she needed life-saving surgery. She needed to be flown to New York, and surgery, emergency, they needed $200,000. Now, 40 years ago, $200,000, a lot of money. They didn't have WhatsApp groups. They didn't have internet posts. They had a Haredi newspaper. They took out an ad. This girl needs help. We need $200,000. So what happens? They get a phone call a week later. They get a phone call, and a guy comes along and he says, listen, he's talking to the Rabbanim of the charity. He says, I'll make you a deal. I'll make you a deal, and I'll give you $100,000, 50%, whatever you need, on condition that you take away my Gehenna. Can a person sell his Gehenna? Well, just like a person can maybe do mitzvah in memory of somebody, that means you're giving your mitzvah over to that person. Why can a person sell over his Gehenna? So they came to Rav Asher Weiss and they said, could you sell your Gehenna for the money that he gave? The guy comes back a week later, he's like, I'll double it. Forget about the 100,000. I'll give the full 200,000. But listen, I've done a lot of wrong in my life. And I need to get rid of that wrong. So listen, with $200,000, how much Gehenna is it gonna buy me out of? That was the question. Rav Asher Weiss said, Rabotai, nothing new under the sun. This question was asked over 100 years ago to the Maharsham. Same exact story. And Avrech came back, small shtetl in Europe, and he came back all excited to his wife. I found somebody to support us. The wife said, what are you talking about? You're not the Gadol Hador. I got the rabbi over here. Who's supporting you? Because I found the guy that said that he's going to give us 50% of his earnings if I take away some of his avirot. The woman said, nothing doing. You can't take away your avirot. She went to the rabbi of the town, Mahasham, and he wrote, you cannot sell over your Gehenam, and you cannot sell over your mitzvot either. The only time this arrangement works is only with Torah. You could support Torah and you'll be considered as if the guy supporting is learning, but you cannot sell your mitzvot, you cannot sell your averot. Doesn't work that way. That's what he knows a person can't sell. Just like you can't sell your averot, you can't sell your mitzvot either. Therefore, the understanding of Rosh and Weiss is Yizchak Zebulun, it's a agreement. Zebulun gets over half, and he gets 100% over from Yisachar. That's his interpretation. But B'shutchem, I have a hidush to say. And the hidush is going to be as follows. My question on this whole pasuk is, where does Zebulun found? What does it say in the pasuk? Again, source number 1, Zebulun lechof yamim yishkon, v'hu lechof oniyot. Where is he found? He's found where? On the seashore. That's where he works from. And my question is, do all Zebuluns work on the seashore? Is that where the business comes from? I know plenty of Zebuluns that don't have any business by the docks. So what does it tell me that Zebulun seems to be found where, specifically where? By the seashore. You understand my question? Yeah, is that clear over time?
Well, back then the commerce was through the sea.
The Uncle says that the brachot that Yaakov gave to his children was not only brachot to his specific children, but to all generations. For some reason, these brachot and the way he worded it applies to everybody and forever. So the question is, what is the connection between Zebulun and the seashore? Oh, maybe. I saw Gemara Tanit on Daf Chaf Aleph. The Gemara says, I'll read it inside in a moment. But one time, you had two great rabbis, two Tanaim, Rabbi Yochanan and Ilfa. What happened to these rabbis? They were learning in the yeshiva and they were broke. They had no money. So both of them decided that they're going to go out to the business world in order to support themselves. And as they sat down to eat bread, they were sitting down by a dilapidated wall. And as they're eating bread, all of a sudden Rabbi Yochanan hears the sound or the voice of two angels. And one angel says to the other, let us push this wall over these two rabbis and kill them. That's what one angel said to the other. But then the other angel said, no. The time has come for one of these rabbis to become great, and let's leave them alone. And the story goes that Rabbi Yochanan tells Ilfa that I'm going to go back to the yeshiva. Ilfa goes to work and becomes a great businessman, ends up supporting Torah, and Rabbi Yochanan becomes the Rosh Yeshiva. That's the story. Can I read it inside? The story says as follows: Tanit, Daf Chaf Aleph. In the fourth source, says the Gemara, Ilfa, the Rabbi Yochanan, Habu Garasei Be'oraita. They were learning Torah together. Dichika lehu milta tuva. They became very, very poor. Amre. So they said to each other, Nekum, let's get up. V'nizil v'ne'ebad iskam v'nukayem v'nafshin efes kilo yeh b'chai evyon. Let's get up and let's work so the pasuk is not fulfilled on us, that there shouldn't be any evyonim, any poor people amongst the nation. Azlu, they went. Otivu tute gudari iya. And they sat under a dilapidated tree. And what happens? Over here, they began to eat some bread. Agav, what does it mean they began to eat bread? Why all of a sudden is going to have to tell me they began to eat bread? So you know there's a concept out there called hangry? Roman, you know what hangry even means? What does hangry mean?
It happens to me every night.
That when a person is hungry, he gets angry. By the way, I thought that was a concept that Americans made up. I found it in a rabbi called the Igrat de Kala. He said the reason why they sat down to eat bread is because they had a big decision to make at this point. They were deciding whether or not to leave the Beit Midrash, and that's like a life and death question. They said to themselves, we cannot consciously make a positive decision if we're hungry. Because he says the behavior of man when he's hungry is that there's kas. There is anger over there. Therefore, next time you yell at your wife because there was no dinner, it's not, it's bad midot, but at least it's sourced that when a person is hungry, he does become angry. And therefore, they didn't want to make this decision on an angry mind. Therefore, they sat down to eat bread in order to calm their bellies down. Says the Igrat de Kala, that's how I'll explain the behavior of the brothers. Because if you remember 3 weeks ago in Perashah, when they sold Yosef, what does it say after they threw him inside the pit? They sat down to eat bread. And he says, how could they sit down to eat bread? Their brother is screaming from the pit, let me out, let me out. The Midrash says that when they threw Yosef in the pit, he was holding on to the legs of Shimon and he was dragging him. And he was crying, he was screaming. They threw him down the pit. He's screaming and they're sitting here eating bread. How cold could you be? Says the Rigat Kala, no. It shows the tzaddikim. Because they came along and they said to themselves, you're right, why are we so cold to our brother? If we're going to make this decision and either kill him or sell him, we cannot be angry. We cannot make it on an empty stomach. Therefore, they specifically sat down to eat bread in order to calm their stomachs down, in order to make a conscious decision whether or not to sell Yosef or whether or not where to kill him. So that's where it comes from. So that's why Rabbi Yochanan and Ilfa, they sat down to eat bread. Continuing, what happens? Two angels came along. So Rabbi Yochanan hears one of the angels tell his friend, what does he say? Let us put this wall on them and kill them. Why? Because they're leaving Olam Haba, they're leaving learning, and they're being involved in temporary. They're going to work. Amar le idach. The other angel said, no, shavkinhu, leave them alone. Because one of these rabbis, his time has come. His time has come to be great. Rabbi Yochanan hears this. Ilfa lo shama. Ilfa didn't hear. What happens? Amar le Rabbi Yochanan le Ilfa. So Rabbi Yochanan asks Ilfa, Shamar mor midei. Did you hear? Did you hear voices just now? Amar le la. I didn't hear anything. Amar midisham'ei ana ve'ilfa lo shama. Shma mina ledidi kamei li sha'ata. Since Ilfa didn't hear it, but I heard it, it must be that when the angel said the time has come for one of these rabbis, he's talking about me. And then what did Rabbi Yochanan do? Amar le Rabbi Yochanan ehedar. I'm going back to the yeshiva. I'm going back, and the pasuk will be fulfilled on me that Torah learning has to continue even in dire poverty. Rabbi Yochanan hadar, he went back. Ilfa lo hadar, Ilfa didn't go back. Ilfa malech Rabbi Yochanan. When Ilfa came back to the business world, Rabbi Yochanan, he became the king. He became the Rosh Yeshiva, and there's a rule. The Rosh Yeshiva has to be wealthy. He has to be rich. And therefore, at this point, you had both Ilfa rich and Rabbi Yochanan rich. He was the Rosh Yeshiva. What happened? Amulo, i'itiv mor v'gares. They told Ilfa, if you would have continued staying and studying, they tell Ilfa, lo havei melech mor. We wouldn't have made Rabbi Yochanan the Rosh Yeshiva. Rashi says because Ilfa was a bigger Talmid Chacham than Rabbi Yochanan was. Therefore, they told him, that's like a dig, if you would not have left, we would have made you the Rosh Yeshiva instead. What does Ilfa do? Azal, telan nafshei b'askraya de sifinta. He went and he stood on the very tip of the boat. Means, you know how sometimes when the pirates, when they push you off the boat, so that's where he stood. He stood on the very tip of the boat and he said, Amar, i'ika d'sha'el li b'matnita d'Rabbi Chiya v'Rabbi Oshaya v'lo pashtin alei b'matnitin nafleina m'askarya d'svita v'tav'a. He says that if you ask me a question in the brightot of Rabbi Oshaya or Rabbi Chiya and I don't give you the answer, I'm going to jump off this boat, I'm going to drown myself. That's the Gemara. So what's the question? The question is, what's going on over here? Was Ilfa honestly contemplating committing suicide because he didn't know or because he didn't get the pointing of the Rosh Yeshiva? You understand my question? What is going on? Agav, by the way, why is it that Rabbi Yochanan heard the angels? Anybody know? Can anybody guess why Rabbi Yochanan was zochet to hear the angels and nobody else? What time is it? Maybe we won't read it inside. But Shir HaShirim about the Midrash, which is the next source, it says that Rabbi Yochanan, he sacrificed tremendously for Torah. That one time, him and another rabbi, they were walking, and every time they passed by a real estate, whether it was a field, whether it was a business, whether it was a vineyard, Rabbi Yochanan said, in order for me to learn Torah, that was mine. I had to sell it. That was mine. I had to sell it. That was mine. I had to sell it. Every time they passed by a certain property, Rabbi Yochanan told his friend that in order for me to learn Torah, I had to sell it. And therefore, since I guess you would say he sacrificed tremendously for the Torah. So specifically for him, he had the answer, or he heard the voices Malchei Sharet. The rabbis want to learn from here that anytime a person self-sacrifices for the Torah, he's zochet to tremendous yata d'shmaya. You ever heard of a rabbi? His name is Chacham Yosef Yedid Halevi. You know what that was, Roman? He was the Av Beitin for the Bukharian and the Syrian communities in Shuhat Bukhari in the early 1900s. And he had tremendous Misrut Nefesh for the Torah. It said about him that how would he learn in yeshiva? Every single morning he would go to the baker, he would buy one pita bread. He would wash his hands, make it at the dime, make hamotzi, he would eat a kazait of bread right away to be Yosef the mitzvah, and throughout the entire day, he would nibble on the bread a little bit. He wouldn't wait more than 72 minutes, but that's how he would every morning buy the one pita, he would eat that pita the entire day. By the end, Mechan Rabbi to make Birkat HaMazon, that's what he did the entire day, just learning in yeshiva, That's a tremendous Misrut Nefesh that he had for the Torah itself. Therefore, it's considered a tremendous sign. When a person sacrifices, Hashem says, you sacrifice, you're going to be Oleh L'Gdula. Anyway, that's just a side point. So bottom line is, Rabbi Yochanan was zocheh to siyata dishmaya because of what? Because he sacrificed. Now the question is, who are these angels? Rabotai, who are these angels that came to Rabbi Yochanan and to Ilfa? Who are they talking to? I saw an explanation. You know what the Gemara Makot says? The Gemara Makot says that miderech sh'adam roseh lelech ba molechin oto. What does that mean? That when a person wants to go a certain way, even though that way is not necessarily the best for him, Hashem will send him there. It's very important, Rabotai, by the way. This is a side point. But when you're praying for something, what's the proper way to pray for something? You're never supposed to pray for something in specific. Why? Because maybe that's something that you're praying for. It's not for you. It's not for you. The guy prays, I want, I get this from the Hatanim all the time. I want that specific girl. I want her. I want her. That specific one. I say, why do you want that specific one? Most of the time it's because she's pretty. But that's the one I want. That's the one I want. And I tell him, I said, no. I said, don't pray for a specific girl. Just pray that Hashem should give you who's right for you. I think they tell a famous story that happened in one of the yeshivas in Israel. That one of the boys told the Rosh Yeshiva, this is the one I want. That's the only one I'm praying for. And the Rosh Yeshiva, don't do that. You don't know what Hashem is going to give you. Bottom line is that don't pray for her. Pray for a general. The kid prayed for her. He got her in the end. And Baminan, he had children were sick, got divorced. It's Chas v'shalom, we should never pray for something in specific. Pray for what? For something general. Whatever Hashem knows what's good for me. So that's exactly what the Gemara is saying. Whatever way you want to walk in, Hashem will guide you there. Pay attention to the Pesukim. What does it say? Ba molichin oto. What does it mean, molichin? Who knows Hebrew? Molichin. Guide you. But molichin means plural. Doesn't say molich. Doesn't say he's gonna in singular. It says they will guide you. What does that mean? Who's guiding you? Is Hashem guiding me? Oh, very good. It's the malachim. Oh, so it turns out as follows. Turn the page. It says, what is the explanation of molichin, of plural? Well, not turn the page, actually. In mine, just turn the page, but you could say the same exact page. It says the Maharsha as follows. Maharsha says, look inside the Mefarshim. I'm also going to give my 2 cents. It doesn't say that Hashem will guide you. In the plural. What does that mean? What a lot of places say. Every time a person has a certain thought, every time a person speaks, anytime a person does a ma'aseh, you create an angel with your thought process, with your doing, with your words. A person can create an angel, and those angels are the ones that carry you. Those are the angels, the one that escort you to your place. That's why it says molichin, because every time you think, every time you do, every time you speak, you create an angel. Based on this, I wanted to say these are the angels of Ilfa and Rabbi Yochanan. What happens? Rabbi Yochanan and Ilfa, they make a statement. We need to leave the yeshiva. Why? Because we need to go to work. In order to enable us to better serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When they made that statement, who was created? Who was created, Rabotai? Malachim were created. And therefore, it's these Malachim that wanted to come along and push the wall on Rabbi Yochanan and Ilfa. Why? Because they said to themselves, might as well when we kill these rabbis when they're innocent and not when they're guilty. Let us kill them now while they're still fresh from the yeshiva, as opposed to killing them after they go into the business world. That was their goal. Their goal was that these angels that the Rabbi Yochanan and Ilfa created with their mouths of leaving the yeshiva and going to work was these angels that wanted to kill Rabbi Yochanan and Ilfa for making this statement. But what happened? The other angels said, no, leave Rabbi Yochanan alone. Because bottom line is, Rabbi Yochanan is going to be the learner, and who's going to be the earner? Ilfa is going to be the earner. Oh, if that's the case, Rabotai, now we can explain his behavior, Ilfa's behavior. Because the Sefer Haradim says, if I had to give a mashal, what this world is compared to, what would you give? A person's asking you, what is this world? What's the mashal for this world?
Hallway.
Huh?
Like a hallway.
A whole way, that's something Ramchal says. But Sefer Haradim doesn't say that. He says this world is compared to the raging sea. That's what he says. Can we read that inside? Says the Sefer Haradim, Ha'olam hazeh yam so'er. It's like a raging river. Sarich lidmot ha'adam b'dato. A person always has to picture himself ki'ilu hushat. It's as if he's floating in the ocean. Yarim rosho lemala. He must lift his head above the water. Leotzro, to his maker. How? Aidei limura Torah, by learning. V'yizeher pen yichasu b'piv hamayim mezudarim. Be careful that the raging water doesn't go inside your mouth to drown you. V'yishmor min ha'agalim habayim l'tarado. And be careful from the waves that are trying to drown you. V'imlav damo berosho. If you don't be careful, if you don't learn Torah in this world, the world will drown you. The Torah that we have is like is like the life vest. That's like the raft or the life jacket. Or like the title of this class says, it's the rope of life. The bottom line is that if a person is not learning Torah in this world, the world will drown him. That's why pay attention. How do you say drown in Hebrew? Anybody know? Tovea, nitba, to drown. And how do you say Mother Nature in Hebrew? Teva. Same exact word. Because the Teva, the Mother Nature, has the ability to nitba, to drown you. Who says that? Rubinoff says that in the next source. He says, Ki lekach nikra ha-teva b'shem hazeh. That's why Teva, Mother Nature, is called Teva. Ki yidba ha-adam, because it drowns the person. B'mutzaloto. Vayer leber shahad. He goes all the way down. Im lo yizaher bo, if you don't be careful, by learning Torah. Ki mi sheba mitzul yam v'lo yadel l'shot v'tovea. Person doesn't know how to swim, he's going to drown right away. And therefore, that is the key of Olam Hazeh. The key, you want to know how to survive this world. Surviving this world is only Derech HaTorah. Says the Shem Shmuel. That's exactly why it says in the Torah, Leman tizkiru va'asitem et kol mitzvotai. The only way to remember HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mashal le'echad mushlach tetuch hayam. He gives a mashal of a person that's drowning in the river. Hoshit hakarbanit et hacheva va'amad. So he throws in the life jacket, he throws in the rope, and he says, Tufos, hold on to it. Hevel zeh in your hands biadecha v'atanichenu, and don't let go. Shim tanichenu, if you do, in the chachayim, you don't have a life. Afkach amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem says the same thing to Israel. Kol zman she'atem midbukim b'mitzvot. As long as you're learning Torah, as long as you're stuck to the mitzvot is your rope, is your life jacket. Hatem adabekim b'Hashem elokechem chayim kol hayom. That is the goal. The goal is for you to be attached. Therefore, says the Kilat Yaakov, based on this, that the rope of the Torah is the rope of life. Chevel hu Torah kedusha. That is the rope of life. That's the same rope that you use to pull yourself out of the water, the same rope you use to hayab the Yetzara. Based on all this, Rabotai, we can explain. And with this, we're going to finish. What was the kavanah of Ilfa? Why is Ilfa running all the way up to the boat? And he's saying to himself, if I don't know the answer to the question, what I'm going to do? I'm going to drown myself. What is he saying? What he's saying is, the reason why I'm going on the boat is because I always have to remember something. What is this world? This world is the raging sea, is the ocean. And what is the job of a boat? The job of a boat is to take me from place to place so I don't drown in the river, so I don't drown in the ocean. Therefore, Ilfa specifically stood up on the boat in the middle of the ocean to say, I will never forget the lesson of Yaakov. The reason why Yaakov specifically blessed Zebulun to always be by the water, to be by the boats of the water, not because that's where Zebulun does business. Maybe in the past it used to be that way, but when he was saying the future generations of all Zebuluns, you want to be careful. You want to be careful in the world that you live in. You want to not drown in the waters of life. Zebulun, you also have to make sure to learn. It's not just enough that you support the Yisachar and give him money and enable him to learn. But the fact that you're standing on the boat itself, Ilfa was saying, in order to be saved in the raging river, I'm standing up specifically on the tip of the boat. Just like the boat saves people, it travels people from point A to point B, so too, in order to live life, in order to survive the raging ocean, in order to get from point A to point B, you have to be like the boat, you have to learn. Says Rabbi Friedman, the very last source, Kol zeh kidei sheyasim alibo. He did this in order to put on his heart, to focus. What is the job of a boat? Belev yam, in the heart of the ocean. In order to take people from place to place. Not to drown in the raging ocean. Your human beings are also in danger, so they don't drown in Mother Nature, in the world that we live in today. So you have to find yourself a boat that you survive in. By setting time to learn, you're making yourself a boat. And then that's how you scream out to Hashem. That is a lesson of Rabotai. The reason why Yaakov blessed Zebulun Dafka by the boats is because he was giving him up. Don't forget the lesson of what the Yam represents. The Yam represents the raging river of the world. In order to survive the world, in order to survive the Teva, that you don't drown in it, be Kovei 18. Even the Zebuluns, even though you support the Yisachar, your job is still to learn yourself by Bikon Kovei 18, by setting it, you're on that boat itself. I'm going to end with one more story and then we're finished. What time is it? Then we're finished. Rabbi Zubashan tells a story that one time there was a very successful businessman in Bnei Brak, and he was a very good Zebulun, but he decided at one point in time to leave the Zebulun completely and become a Yisachar. He wants to be full-fledged in the Torah itself, and many people, they were wondering, why did this man leave his business and decide to learn now Yomam Balayla? He told them a story. He said,
that he stood to make a very big profit. And I think from the profit he made over $250,000 in one day. He was very happy. He said, I came home and I was smiling. I went to sleep and I was smiling. I even woke up happy. And then as I was getting out of my house and going to my parking lot, I noticed that the brand new car that I just bought from America, it was stolen. And it had over 20 anti-theft deterrents from the robbers. I didn't fully insure it yet, and it became stolen. And then I did the cheshbon. The exact amount of money that I came home with the day before was the exact amount of money that I paid for that car. And I said to myself, I said, if that's how fast money could disappear, he said, then what's the point of any money that I make? I want to read you the words of the story inside. He says as follows: I sat down and I performed a simple calculation. If it's possible to make so much money in a single day and then immediately afterward lose it with the same ease and speed, what value does the business world have of all the millions of dollars that businessmen earn? Was it not more worthwhile for me to invest my mind in the true business of life, the Torah itself, which is called the best merchandise of all? Was it not better for me to sit and learn another page of Gemara and earn an eternal profit that has no exchange in value, and conscious to my apparent windfall, which came overnight and was lost the same way? The reward for Torah study can never be taken away. Only this will endure forever. These thoughts uplifted me so powerfully that with Siyata D'Shmaya, I was able to come to an immediate decision. I will leave my business and begin earning some real money. On the page of Gemara, another Tur Beit Yosef, another Halakha Shulchan Aruch, and another. A powerful example. And therefore, I think what the lesson is, same thing that Yaakov was telling his kids. You want to know why I put myself first? You want to know why it's Shemi, why it's me first? You want to know why I called my son Yosef? You want to know what the lesson of Zebulun is that we must always put the Torah in our lives first. Wishing everybody here a Shabbat Shalom.